Simon Saradzhyan is joining us now from Boston. He is the founding director of the Russia Matters Project at Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. Simon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
What's the takeaway from this election with Vladimir Putin expected to easily win?
Well, if the elections go as the Kremlin hopes, there'll be a 70% turnout, and of those 70%, 70% would vote for Vladimir Putin. And the polls by the state-owned polling agency FiOS shows just that. If that happens, it means half of Russia's registered voters support Vladimir Putin. And that sends a signal to the elites, to the public, but also to potential rivals that, Vladimir Putin is the only choice, really, Russia has. So if these results are achieved, he would be feeling confident that he can continue to rule unchallenged for another 6 years.
So you've got 7 candidates running against him. This is up from 3 in 2012. Are they essentially splitting the opposition to Putin's vote and barring any one person from being a real challenger to him?
Well, in Russia, I'd say there is opposition that has been sort of integrated into the system, if you will. That's the Communist Party, the Liberal Democratic Party, and their candidates are the only ones in these elections that are above the statistical margin of error, in addition, of course, to Vladimir Putin. The rest are below. So there's no real competition. And the primary reason for that is that the only viable candidate that showed strong results in the Moscow mayor's elections, Alexei Navalny, cannot run. So in a sense, it's a more of a formal procedure than a real competition.
Last year, you mentioned Alexei Navalny. His corruption investigation into the prime minister and the Putin loyalists, Dmitry Medvedev, actually prompted this huge anti-government protests all over the place. Has this impacted people's views of Putin in any way?
Well, if you look at the approval ratings of Vladimir Putin, they stay above 70%. Whereas if you look at the approval ratings of the government and the prime minister, they are much lower. And in fact, that has been the case in Russia for a while. The sort of a dichotomy of the good Tsar and the bad boyars, if you will. So the population tends to blame the government, the prime minister, but not the president for the socio-economic ills of Russia and corruption as well.
Well, what about the annexation of Crimea? How does this play into it at all, if at all?
I think that particular development has played well into the hands of Vladimir Putin. He has taken credit for that, and that has increased the patriotic moods of Russians and have made some Russians that were previously not inclined to support Vladimir Putin to be more supportive of him. So it is no accident that just several days before the actual elections, his last, I think, stop on the election campaign was in Crimea, in Sevastopol, the capital of Crimea.
All righty. Well, Simon, we're going to have to leave it right there. We certainly appreciate you joining us. Simon Saradzhyan.